The camera sensor is where all the magic happens. The sensor is where the light hits the photosensitive pixels to create and save our images. Each camera has a different size and type of sensor. But how does it all work? The surface of the camera sensor is made up of thousands of photosites. When light hits each one of these photosites, a filter determines what color the light is. All the photosites talk to each other and in a flash work with the CPU in the camera to determine what color each photosite should be and how light or dark it is based on the settings you have chosen for exposing. And then, boom, we have a saved image. All camera sensors aren't made equally. Different cameras will have different sizes. Full frame. A full frame camera means the sensor is the size of a 35mm frame. 35mm being the size of most common size film used in film photography back in the day. This is going to be the biggest and most expensive sensor size in the prosumer camera world. Cropped, or APS-C. This sensor is a bit smaller than the full frame and is used in a lot of smaller DSLR and mirrorless cameras. It tends to be a bit cheaper and generally has less megapixels than a full frame camera. Micro Four Thirds. This is a bit smaller than the APS-C size sensor and is common in companies like Olympus and Panasonic. 1-inch or 1/3 sensors are very small and are normally found in point-and-shoot cameras and cell phones. So let's go ahead and take a look at sensors in real life. I have a cropped sensor camera and I have a full frame sensor camera. This is my Fuji X-T2, and let's take off the port cap, and there you go. That is a cropped sensor right there. I'm using mirrorless cameras right now, so we don't have to use the mirror, we don't have to move the mirror to see the actual sensor. Now let's take a look at the full frame sensor. We'll take the port cap off here. Bam. Look at that full frame sensor in all its glory. This is an A7R. It's a full frame sensor inside a mirrorless camera. Now when I bring the two of them up next to each other, you can see the difference in size. It's quite a physical difference. There is also a relationship between sensor size and focal length. An easy way to understand this is with a small sensor, such as a crop sensor, it is literally cropping the image, which results in a more telephoto or zoomed in shot. So let's take the same lens and let's put it on a full frame sensor and a crop sensor. Now I have Sam's A7R III sitting in front of us. It has a 50mm Canon lens with an adapter on it. And let's go ahead and take a shot. Nicely exposed, in focus, bam. 50mm, looks great. Let's swap this out for a cropped sensor camera in the Canon world and use the same lens. All right, so now I've put the same 50mm lens on the Canon cropped lens. It's the EOS Rebel T5i. I haven't moved the tripod, so I'm just gonna put this right back on. And there we go. So now you can see how much cropped in the crop sensor really goes in. It's the same 50mm lens, but with the 50 on the full frame, it's sort of a true 50mm lens. The crop sensor does actually crop it in quite a bit. You can see we're getting cut off on the side, on the right side with that pot in the background, whereas in the full frame, you can really see a big amount of difference. So why choose one sensor over the other? There are lots of reasons, but before we dive too deep into that, I want to make sure that you know you can create fantastic images with any size sensor. It's always going to fall on you, the photographer and artist, to find a compelling subject and capture it with the excellent composition and exposure that you've learned in this class. The greatness of your art and photography is not determined by what kind of equipment and sensor you have. Typically, full frame sensors are used by most professional photographers. The reason being that the size of the sensor itself allows for better performance in low light. The larger the sensor, the easier it is for it to collect light. It also helps with the depth of field. The aesthetic of your subject in focus and lots of background out of focus is achieved better with a larger sensor. And finally, if you're planning on printing large photos or cropping in, the larger full frame sensor will allow you to do that more easily without a lot of loss in quality. A crop sensor, or APS-C sensor, is typically cheaper, smaller, and lightweight, which is why most photographers would choose to use it. It would still produce excellent images, although the megapixel is a bit lower. Crop sensors are great for travel and will allow your camera to be smaller, making all the components smaller and easier to carry. So compare this Fuji camera to this DSLR. A lot has to do with the lack of a mirror, but also the size of the sensor. The smaller your sensor gets, the lower quality and ability to capture in low light will be. This is one of the biggest drawbacks to using point and shoots and smartphones. Although as technology gets better and better, smartphone sensors have gotten better as well. It's important to be very careful with your sensor. I cannot stress this enough. If you damage or scratch your sensor in any way, it can be very costly to repair and can potentially ruin your entire camera. I would not recommend cleaning your sensor yourself unless you've been trained and practiced on some dummy sensors. You will want to make sure you keep your port cap on your camera at all times when there's no lens on it, and you don't ever want to leave it open to the air. Any bit of hair, dust, lint, or moisture that lands on your sensor can affect your image and potentially damage it. It's good to get your camera sensor cleaned every now and then if you do shoot a lot. I will always take my camera to be cleaned at my local camera shop before a big shoot. They will have specialty tools and be practiced in it. If you do run into an emergency in the field and you see a bit of dust or air in your camera, the best safe practice is to blow across the port, never at it. If you can use compressed can of air or a hand blower, it'll be better. If you do use your breath from your mouth, you will run the risk of a moisture spot coming out and landing on your sensor. By now, I hope you understand the different types of sensors, pros and cons and tips about camera sensors.